Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. Appreciate y'all joining in. If y'all haven't already, make sure to subscribe. And today, what I want to talk about is I've been away from the prison since 2017, and it's crazy how I still trip out when I see, people dressed out in all white. But also, since I'm in public transportation now, I've seen some familiar faces, when I'm driving through downtown, and I've even had a few get on my bus. And one of them was, I'll never forget, he was a G5, you know, so yeah, like I would see him, he gets on my bus from time to time when I'm going through downtown, and he don't talk just the way, like he never talked in prison, and he just sits down, but he has that killer look, like I ain't gonna lie. So, and like I said, I'll never forget a face. And then this other one, he got on my bus, and I'm like 90% sure that it was the same offender that I would bump heads with a lot at the prison, because this particular offender, he wanted to do things on his own time. What I mean by that, if he had a lay-in, he wanted to make sure he got out, 5, 10, 15 minutes before his actual lay-in. And I'll never forget this. I was on 8 desk, and just through the corner of my eye, my peripheral, I see a shadow walking, and I look that way, and I'm like, "What are you doing?" "Oh, I got my lane. I didn't call out for you. Go back to the house." "Why I need to go to my lane?" Like, "I don't care. I didn't call out for you. It's not time yet." And he's like, "That's bullshit." And of course, right, I got up. I'm like, "Dude, I'm not saying." And then by that time, he's already getting close to it. I'm like, "What are you doing? Get back to the fucking house." Like, I got pissed. And I mean, it got to the point where he yelled at me, so I'm there getting back at him, and just that whole macho ego, right? Like, just, and I'm like, I'm not gonna take, at that, you're not gonna go to your lane now. Fuck that. Go back to the house. You're gonna get a case for out of place and failure to obey order. Keep it coming. And by that time, the sergeant came out from his office, and he just stood there. He's like, just hearing the conversation. And finally, he's like, "Dude, go back to the house. He already told you you're not going. Go back to the house." And and of course, the sergeant. I mean, this dude, he's freaking tall. Like, I think he was like, what, 6 something. The sergeant. So yeah, right. Uh, so seeing him on the bus, it kind of like, damn, did he remember that? Did he remember the last time when we bumped heads? Like, is he gonna react a certain way? That I gotta look over my shoulder. But not really. Like, the whole time, he was just, "Hey, can I get a transfer?" He sat down, and when he got off, "All right, thank you." And I'm just like, damn, like, you know. But yeah, right. Like I said, I'm like 90% sure. And the only reason why, like, I don't forget a face is because, as an officer, you got to do count time, right? You gotta do the head count, and you got to switch with your picket, and the picket does the roster count, and that one's more time consuming. But that one's like, "Hey, everybody line up, let me see your ID," and then match the face, the ID number with the roster. And just, it's like I said, it's more time consuming. And but that's how you learn the offenders, right? That's how you remember their faces. um so yeah, right. So it was just like, it's crazy to see that. And then I'll never forget, like, when I first started, I had this big, because there, we passed through Central, and it's right there by the jail. So, I have these offenders or ex-offenders come out from the jail, and they got released. They're like, "Hey man, I just got out. Here's the paperwork. Can I catch a ride?" And at that time, I still had that officer mindset. I'm like, if you don't got your fare, like, you know, get to walking, right? That type of thing. Because it was just like, I don't know what you went to jail for, but you're an ex-offender. Like, you still broke the law. Like, I still had that mindset, right? Now, not so much. Now it's like, "Yeah, you don't got it. Yeah, I got you." And then the other thing too, like I was like I said, like, I was taught as an officer, when you're in that pod, like, I was taught that if you need the sergeant to go down to your building, like, you're not doing your job, because you are the sergeant without the rank. So I had that same mindset, being in public transportation. I have a knucklehead, passenger. He's not wanting to get off, or he's not wanting. I had that mindset too, like, oh, I don't need security, like I am security, like it was just. But after a while, I'm like, that's why security's there. It's their job, not mine. My job is not to deal with the passengers in that sense, right? So it took an adjustment. Like, I'm not gonna lie, it took an adjustment because it was like, but I know, right? Like, I know, like, working at the prison and then to public transportation, like I know by the tattoos, the shade of tattoos. I know the body language. Like, I know when they get on my bus, I know, like, they did some time, and then it's like, do I gotta be on guard? Like, as far as, like, are they gonna cause issues on my bus, or are they just gonna chill, just go from where they need to from where I picked them up at to wherever they need to get off at, and that's it. Am I gonna see them again? That type of thing. But I mean, for the most part, like, the ones I do have issues with now in public transportation, they're under the influence or something, right? Um, but let me go ahead and get into the me promoting for sergeant, right? Because in this time, I think I was already 3 years as an officer, and at that point, my days of working the pods were already, like, becoming less and less, right? Like, I was once I got put on 7 desk, and then I got put to 8 desk, and then from there, I got the taste of being chain officer, and then being a turnout. It was like, man, once you got chain officer, like, man, your job was less stressful, like, because at that point the incoming chain was already taken care of. I mean, the outgoing chain was ready to head out. So you just once you took over, night shift would tell you, like, hey, you know what? This is how many you got incoming chain. They're right here. This is their cases, their files. You got this many that left. So all you had to do, right? All I had to do was just, get on the radio, and then just let A Tower know that, hey, you know what? The Bluebird, is heading out, and then however many are on board, and dropped off this many, picked up this many total offenders going out, plus the officers. And then that was it, right? And at that point, I had pretty much all day until they got their housing to inventory their property, and then get them their meal, right? Get them their lunch, because for the most part they will already be in the house for dinner time. So yeah, right. Like, and I'll never forget an officer, veteran officer. He's like, man, he goes, did you put in for sergeant already? Because it's like, those are the positions that you get for if you are gonna become a sergeant. And I'm like, I'm considering it, but I haven't put in for it. He goes, well, I mean, that's what I'm saying. And I'll never forget, I asked him too. I'm like, how come you didn't put in for sergeant? Because there were some veteran officers that they were just CO5s, but they never put in for it. And it's because they said, right, like, I don't want to deal with the BS. And it wasn't until I became a sergeant that I understood the BS. And yeah, right, it's a whole different mental type of stress as a sergeant. Was it worth it? Yeah, it was. I had my days where, like dang, like, I mean, it got to the point where at that time I would always have a high bald fade with a one on top, so I kept my hair short. Of course, we had to be clean shaven, and but when I would go to my barber would be like, dude, you got patches, you're losing hair, like, that stress is gonna get to you. And yeah, like, no lie, I had patches like crazy. And yes, it wasn't until I promoted when I started getting my haircuts there at the prison. I just didn't trust, like, that's just me. I just didn't trust an inmate cutting my hair. Like, I just didn't. I would always get that, like, dude, like, you can get a free haircut there at the unit. Why are you paying, somewhere else? I'm like, that was just me. Like, as an officer, like, that was just me. But once I promoted and I got moved to SEG, and I would get my haircut there at SEG. I trust that inmate so much that I even fell asleep, when he did my hair. And it got even to the point where, since I wanted the high bald fade, I mean, they're there with the razor, like, going all the way around with the razor. I trusted them, right? No nicks, no nothing. So, you know, so before I promoted, I asked my shift captain, and it was just us two. We were on our way out. And my, hey, Cap, can I ask you something? And I'm like, hey, I'm considering, putting in for sergeant. But any advice? I mean, one, do you think I'm ready? And he's like, he goes, it's gonna be a total different mental stress now, more responsibility. He goes, but whatever building you go to, like your officers' lives are in your hands, and have their back, they'll have your back, and what else? And he goes, and just stand by your call, right? Whether it's a good call or bad call, like just be ready to take that heat because it will happen. And but at the end, just make sure you and your officers, go home at the end of the day. And he goes, but yeah, he goes, I'd say you're ready. So of course, right, I prayed about it. I put in the application, left it in God's hands. Then I interviewed with the wardens and the majors, and it was just like, some different scenarios about policy. And I mean, yeah, right. I mean, I got the position. It was, I think, like 7 or 8 of us that interviewed, and three. I was one of the 3 that got promoted. So then from there, we took off to Huntsville. We left, I believe, on a Sunday. I had to be there Monday for the academy. And same thing, right? Uniform inspection, then going through policies, procedures, running scenarios of use of force, ICS. Because again, right, like everybody's gonna run, or everybody's gonna do things, their own way. For example, if you have somebody that's jacking the day room that don't want to go back to the house, how would you handle it? Would you go in there, show a force, and try to, like, get him to go back to the house, or give him that order from the day room, because you do have a tray slot right there on the day room door, and give him that order to come, to come up to the door, cuff up, but at the end, it's like, what is that policy? Like, what is the policy that you have to follow through, right? And that was just one example. Another one, how you gonna initiate ICS if you're doing your round and then you find a cutter, right? Like that kind of thing. What would you do? Those kind of things. And of course, right, we did some sightseeing. We we had a like a lounging area in the from the dorm rooms. Instead of just being cooped up in the room, like there was a little lounging area that had pool tables, that had some couches, some TVs. And back then, right, the academy itself was on a college campus. I remember that. And Saturday was graduation. We did some sightseeing. Just went to the Texas Prison Museum. And we checked out that one statue, that freaking big ass statue that's out there. And I think from Sam Houston or Stephen F. Austin. I don't know. I gotta go back and look. And then of course, right, Saturday was graduation, so your family shows up, and then right there, the wardens are there. And then by that time, like you already know that what shift you're going to. So Saturday, go back home, celebrate it Saturday night. Sunday, relax, and then Monday, headed back to the unit. And I was on, I believe, 2BGP when I first started, and boom, right off the back to the dorms. So like I remember, I'll never forget, as I'm making my walkthrough from passing through 7 building, I already hear somebody like, hey, Espinosa, bitch ass, and I'm like, hey, thank you, man, I got you. And it was kind of like one of those things, right? Like, was it a term of respect? Was it an insult? But at the end, it's like, at that point, some will say, yeah, Espinosa's a bitch ass. Or others would say, like, hey, you know what, Espinosa, he's on point. And both of them were true, right? Because it's like, and I'm talking about from the offender's point of view, because it's like, like I always say, right, there's that line. If they cross that line, then you're gonna get this side from me. But at the end, it's like, if I pick up contraband and I don't give the offender the case, I use it to my benefit, because it's like, at that point, I get them into the office. I'm like, what do you know? Um, you know, what's the cell that I need to look for, who has that shank, who has that's the stuff that I look for. And that's what I'm saying, right? Because it's like I could give him a case and that'd be it. But for me, I always wanted to know where those, homemade shanks were, because yes, 9 times out of 10, those shanks are used amongst themselves for the offenders. But still, it's like the last thing I want is my officers doing their round or they're dropping and then boom, they get attacked. That kind of thing. So that's what I always try to do. And of course I'm talking about as a supervisor, as a sergeant. Now the bitch ass, like, at that point it was like, okay, the offender assaulted one of us for whatever reason. I mean, we couldn't beat the shit out of them as much as we wanted to. We couldn't. But it's like, you know what? This offender didn't follow feeding procedures. He's not gonna eat. This offender doesn't want to shower. He's not gonna shower. So, there were ways around it. Now, when I say did he follow feeding procedures, like, again, right? There's the eye in the sky. I'm coming up to the door. As far as I know, they didn't follow feeding procedures because they didn't hear me, or they didn't follow my order when I say, hey, offender, turn on your light, sit back on your cell. But the whole time I'm just standing there at the door, like that kind of thing. Am I right? Am I wrong? But at the end, you got to understand, he assaulted one of us. Like, it is what it is, but that's just the way things got done, right? Was I wrong for it? I mean, you just have to be there, right? Like, you have to be in that position knowing that, hey, they assaulted one of us. Yes, they're supposed to get fed, yeah, but hey, he assaulted one of us. Like, why? Like, if you're trying to catch out, get in a fight with, with another offender, but why take it all on us? It was those kind of things. But again, am I right for it? Am I wrong? At the end of the day, I made it point blank clear about that line of respect. Y'all stay on your side, we'll stay on our side. And that's it, right? But once I promoted, like I said, I went down to the dorms on nights, and it was a different ball game being out there because, one, as an officer, I never worked the dorms, so it was all new to me. But I knew that I wanted to know my officers. I wanted to know a little bit more about them. And hey, y'all let me know how y'all do things out here, because I never worked the dorm before. Like, so, I clearly there's no in and outs. I know y'all still got to do your cell searches, but other than that, like, I would tell them my advice. Y'all go in there, because I think I had two officers that worked the dorms, so I would tell them, plus the control. But I would tell them, like, I don't want y'all going in there by yourselves. Like, both of y'all at the same time. One can take 2 row, the other one can be on the first floor, or y'all be together. Because I'm not gonna lie, like, being at the dorms when I did my round, at first I was just like, damn, like, open layout, and you had bunks on both sides. So as you're doing your walkthrough, it's like you're walking facing forward, but then yet you have your back with the offenders. So it was just like a very, like, at any point in time they can easily just buck, and just from, and I'm not working B side, so I don't have my vest, but they can easily just give me a stab, right? It was just those kind of things that, yes, even though they were on good behavior, but still, it's like, it was just a crazy feeling. And of course, right, it's no different than being out in the buildings on day room, but still, it's just like you have more offenders out in the dorms than you do in the buildings. But yeah, it was just, and for the most part, we fed them there. They didn't have to leave. We'd get the food and just give them the trays, or the Johnnies, depending whatever the kitchen sent out. And then afterwards, right, I got switched over to 7 building. I was still on nights, and again, right, just doing my rounds. Picked up some techniques from other sergeants. I made it a point to do a walkthrough outside the building, and just to look at for any cracks in the walls, right, from the from where the from where the offenders were sitting staying at, whatever. And then also for the antennas sticking out, and that's an automatic case. They're not supposed to have those antennas sticking out, or the clothing lines. Um, and again, right, like if I can write cases, I mean, I want my officers to deal with less offenders out in the day room during dayroom time, right? So I did my part with that, and of course, right, just responding to incidents whenever an incident would occur. But for the most part, like I couldn't leave the building either, right? I had to stay on my building because if I were to respond, I'm taking that big risk. If I were to respond, going to another building, and if something happens on my building and I'm not there, it's gonna fall back on me. Um, but night times was, of course, right, was ran totally different than daytime. I feel like daytime was more mental stress. I had, 3 wardens. I had like 2, 3 different captains, both majors, the lieutenants, and it was just the communication was not always on point. And I never forget. I think I was working for building, and at this time we had we still had clipper shave passes, right? So everybody had to be clean shaven. There was no such thing as a religious beard pass. So this this particular day, for whatever reason, I was the lucky one, and O3 just kept putting me on blast on the radio. And I made sure, like, I was there looking at every single offender before they left my building as they were walking to chow, that they were clean shaven, right? Like, no freaking facial hair whatsoever. And if I saw any, hey, go shave or go back to the house, go to the barbershop, because I have, again, right? Like, not just my building, but the offenders need to look like I'm running the building, like me and my officers, like in a way, like these offenders are representing us, right? Like of how we run the building. Because if they go out there and they're looking like shit, like their shirts aren't tucked in, their pants halfway down their butt, um, like this is what I expect, right? Shirts tucked in, right side of the line, off the noise, pants on your waistline, and then the collars, right? The collars, have to be fixed. So, with those kind of things, plus, making sure that they're clean shaven. But this particular day, like, man, like, I think like 4 or 5 times I got put on blast from the same warden. And she was just like, why is this offender coming out here not clean shaven? And I'm like, no, ma'am, like, they are. Like, no, not this one. I'm gonna send them back. But it was those kind of things. And I'll never forget my lieutenant's like, hey, don't let that get to you. But it is, because I'm making sure that before they leave my building, I'm making sure that they're. But I think what it was, they were coming from a lane. But even then, right? Like, why didn't we check them before they left? So it was that kind of thing. Like, damn, like. So it was just, and I ain't gonna lie, that got to me. And then of course, right? Like as a sergeant, you want to make sure all your moves are completed, before night shift comes on. And then when you're running everything, I mean, you're talking about, you're running, like I said it before, like you're running rec, morning rec, and then they go back to the house, chow, they go back to the house. So it's a lot, you got mass movement, and then when they're running commissary, oh, I'm talking about A side, it's like, it's one of those things that, and on top of all that, you still got to pat search the offenders, any chance you get. If you don't have an extra officer in your building, you got to do the escort with, if it was pilsners, if it was grievance, it was those kind of things. Because yes, my officer would be the one to escort, but if they were doing something else already, then I would fill in. But it was, yeah, right, it was just crazy. But then once I transitioned over to SEG, that was an eye-opener. And that's when I found out that the lieutenant decides who they get to pick, as sergeants, because you always got moved around. So again, right, like I started off in 1B GP as an officer, and then I got promoted. I went to 2B GP, and then when I got to days, I was 1A GP. But I was never I was never a sergeant where I started from. I guess because of conflict of interest or something. But then when I got put in SEG, that was just like, I've never worked seg before, like never. So I had to learn quick. I had to learn quick that the way things were ran in seg was completely different to how things were ran in GP. What I could get away with in GP, I couldn't get away with in seg, right? And I'll never forget um, this one offender. He did dash me, and that was the first time I got dashed, and it was just by water. But you know, again, right in GP, you dash any of us, you're not gonna get fed, right? So in seg, I tried that shit, and I told my officer, "No, we're not gonna feed him." And sure enough, we continue feeding everywhere else. And man, you just hear that offender like, like freaking messing with the door. And the last thing we need is for him to pop open that door, because it's happened before, and the door opens and there we are, right? Me and my officer, and my officer told me like, "Hey, Sarge, I think we should go feed him, because you know how are we gonna explain if he does get out, and the reason why he got out because we didn't feed him?" And again, right, like, and that's what I'm saying. Like, I had to learn quick because, you know, uh, like I said, GP, that can slide, but in SEG, like, how do you explain that? So I was just like, and I knew better, right? I knew better as a supervisor. I knew better, but at the same time, it's like, nah, like, I'm not gonna let you have that over me. But it's like how he said too. It's like, man, he goes, look, it was just water. Man, now I know, but why did you even have to dash me to begin with? And he told me, I gotta put you in check. My motherfucker, right? He goes, I'm telling you. And he told me, he goes, you're gonna have to learn. He goes, the way we do shit out here is a lot different than out there in GP. He goes, you can have a quiet night, or we can make sure, shit pops off. And so, yeah. So, like I said, I had to learn quick. And I remember when I was a CO, I would always hear use of force, 5-man teams for SEG, because all that SEG did was Rex and showers. That's all they would do day in, day out. They would take them out, they get their hour of rec time, put them back in, showers, and that's it, right? That's all they would do. But then you would always hear, over the radio, the sergeant calling ICS because an offender is refusing to go back to the house from the wreck. Right, so at that point, you got to set up the 5-man team, give them that order on camera. So it was always, busy in that sense. And for us, once I got to nights in SEG, it was a jack slot. There was a few that, yeah, they would do. He took them out for a cell search, and then they pulled away, and then had to take them out, take them down, use the force. But I think that'll be it for this video. I'll start off with my first, use of force in SEG, my first ICS. And it was actually on a Christmas Eve going to Christmas morning. I was on nights, and it was with this particular offender that, man, this dude, he's one of the notorious offenders in the state. He has so many staff assaults, so many not just staff assaults, but he can manipulate the handcuffs. So yeah, like I'll start off with that one on the next video. But if y'all made it up to here, I appreciate y'all for tuning in. If you like this video, don't forget to hit that like. Make sure you subscribe. I hope y'all are well. I hope y'all are blessed, and I will see y'all on the next one.